So we're going to build the model objects now. So I'm recording this on this occasion because this is in effect a demo, something I would do in class. Now, unfortunately, I'm using my internal microphone because I've found myself stranded without my desktop microphone. So if the audio quality is a bit ropey, my apologies. Right. So I'm going to start sort of bottom up. And I know that I need a model object that contains a body parameter that's either a weight or a height. I also know there's a maximum and minimum value on those, and then I want to display it, and also that the user is going to type in these parameters and they're going to get stored. So I'm sort of conscious that the input from the user is a string, and we are somewhere going to have to pass that and convert that to a fractional number. So I'm going to encapsulate that all in a model object, rightly or wrongly, for the purposes of this task. So let's add a new item, which is just going to be a C# class. So there we go, and I'm going to call this one body parameter. So in other words, both weight and height are body parameters. So let's encapsulate the information. We can always prune this and improve it later, no doubt. So there we go. There's the constructor. It's in the right namespace. So let's, sorry, that's not the constructor. That's the class declaration. Let's first of all provide some storage, some backing storage for these things. So we know we have a value for a given body parameter. So by default, I'll make them private. And it's going to be a double. Now, thinking ahead, before I actually proceed with this, remember the user's going to type this in as a string. It's going to get passed. If that succeeds, it's going to be checked to see if it's in the right range. If it's not, how do I know that? Well, I can either create a Boolean, which is valid, or better, we can have an optional. So an optional is a variable whereby it can either take a value or null. And null indicates I don't have a value. So my actual value for this parameter is going to be stored like that. I use this underscore prefix probably because I've come from other platforms. You may or may not like that, but you can change it if you wish. We know there's a range. Okay, so I also need to know the minimum value. That needs to be declared up front, probably via the constructor, and the maximum value. I also wanted some sort of metadata so that I can write concise code. So what's the name of this thing? So let's have a string called name string and another string for its units. This is for the purpose of displaying. Now the benefit of putting this in your model is that it's all pure model code. There's no reference to user interface anywhere, which makes it very nice for unit testing. If you don't know what unit testing is, I'm going to show you in the next video. But unit testing is one of these wonderful things that once you discover it, you probably don't want to live without it. Okay, so let's start with what information will we be given up front, and that is via the constructor. So that's a public method. It's got the same name as the class, no return type. And now let's have double min, double max, string, parameter name, and string units. Now, if you think I'm doing all this off the top of my head, I'm not going to pretend to be superhuman. I'm working from notes, of course I am. But I had to write this and rewrite it and jig it a bit before I did this. So let's not be under any illusion. If you think I can do this all naturally, just like that, no. Right, so we set the minimum and the max. And the point of doing this, sometimes it's a bit like teaching maths, really. It's the way it flows across the board and you talk as you do it. A lot of information gets communicated that way, which is why at this stage of the course I am still so what we're doing now is we're just copying the parameters from the constructor to our backend store. Let's change that one to capital U. This is all on the GitHub site, so you don't have to type all this yourself, but I think it's nice to do that. Okay, so this lets us construct this parameter and encapsulate maximum, minimum, actual value, the name of this thing for display purposes, and the units for display purposes. Now, we probably want to be able to set and read the value. So that makes sense. So again, we're going to have a public property this time, right? And it's going to return a double question mark. So again, it's this optional thing. We'll see in a minute. Very useful. If you've come from Swift on the iOS side, you'll use it all the time. And I guess that's why I was so drawn to it. And now we're going to write the getter, and that is simply to return the value. So as a general rule, you don't normally give access to the actual storage parameters directly. That's the sort of general rule that we follow, isn't it? So let's have the setter. Now this is where it gets interesting, right? And this is where I love the optionals. I'm a big fan of optionals. So if, right, let's break this up. If the value being passed, okay, yes, it's a setter, so it's called value. Okay, is greater than or equal to the minimum value, and this is the applied parameter, isn't it? Value is less than or equal to the maximum. That's good. Okay, that's the condition met to say we have a valid value. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Again, no video editing, none at all. You get it as it happened, pretty much. Okay, so then we will set our underscore value. You can see why I put the underscore now. Equals value. Okay, that's simple. You think, well, starting to question, what was the point of having a setter? Why not just give them direct access? Well, the clue's in that if statement. Else, so what do we do if they're not in range? All right. Now here's the lovely bit. I think this is wonderful. Null. Bang. So there we go. If you try and set an incorrect value on this one, an out of range value, you'll actually effectively set it to null automatically, right? So that's taken that whole aspect of validation away from any other part of the code and done it in here. Now, a nice little one you can do as well. Sometimes when you create an instance of a class, say you do body parameter height equals new body parameter, parameters go in it, and you want to read it, sometimes just equating it to the instance variable, you can make it have a default behavior. And let's do that. So it's a static method you write, actually. It doesn't look like it when you use it, but you are. It's the what's called the implicit operator. It's quite long syntax for this. Right, and I'm going to return the actual value via the accessor. So it's a double star. Right, body parameter D. Right, so if we forgot all the implicit and operator stuff, it looks like we're creating a static method. You pass in a body parameter and you return d.value. All right. And you think, well, so what? You'll see how I use that in a minute. Okay. There's some lovely sugared syntax to make this actually look pretty when it comes to actually using it. So this lets me actually take an instance of body parameter and just treat it as a double question mark. Okay, without having to do the dot value bit. Right, just a nice little bit of syntactic sugaring. We'll see that later. Okay, now remember, where's this data coming from? Well, it's going to come from a text box. All right. Now, The thing with text boxes is that they are filled with values typed in by people. Now we're going to try and restrict the keyboard to numbers only, but even I can't quite remember what the keyboard layout for iOS looks like. Let's be belt and braces and say, right, now we're going to validate the string and pass it to a double. If it succeeds, we'll try and set the value. If it doesn't succeed, we'll make our value null. So basically, this is the other part of validation. So whatever the user types in is going to be passed in through a method in here. So let's create that method. So public. Now, a few new things in this, which is why it's good to be in demo mode. It's going to return a bool to see if the passing, i.e. string to double conversion, was successful. Of course, when we get the value, we need to put it somewhere. That's straightforward. It's going to go into our property. But if it fails, we also want to know why. Okay, so somehow from the user interface down to this model class, you're going to type something in, something illegal, all right? It's going to get all the way down here, try and pass it. If it fails, okay, we set our parameter null, but it would be good to communicate, well, what failed? Why did it fail? Why is it null? And so that's another return type. Well, I've only got one return type that's allowed, and that's a bool. So when I sort of try different things, I came up with using the following. And so I'm going to go set value from, or you could use using string value. And now here's the clever bit. If you don't know this bit of C#, you will now. Out string error string. Okay, so when you pass a string to this method, it is passing by reference, which in other words means we can modify this inline. All right. What's it moaning about here? Oh, yes. Now that's interesting, actually. So don't be phased by this. Look, you've got a little warning here. It's suggesting remove unused parameter. So yeah, you'd expect the tools to check that you've returned a value, but because this is an out string, it's also saying, oh, why haven't you set this? And why haven't you read this? Yeah. So at the moment, we've got some work to do, of course. Right. First, let's try and pass the string value as a double. The clue's in the name, try and pass. Right, so if this is a double, there are a couple variants on this. Try pass. This is the one where you don't need the try catch block. String value. So that's the value we're going to try and then it too, which is where the idea came from, has an out double new value. There's a lot there. So what's going on there? Well, it's going to try and pass this string to a double. If it succeeds, it's going to write it into this new double here, right? So this is an in place, and it too returns a bool to see if it was successful. So we know we're going to need an else. So this is where it succeeded. Oops. Well, it's not failed. It's because secretly I always wanted to be an accountant. That's the first line of the video. Right. So okay. So now we say okay, that succeeded. So this here should contain a suitable value. Doesn't mean it's in range, but it is at least a double. So I'm going to use my setter. Very important. Value equals new value. Now, if you remember what the setter does, right? It also that does the range checking. So this is going to do the string parsing, and then when we apply it to the internal setter, well, actually it's public, it will then try and convert it. So we can immediately test our value to see if it's null. So succeeded in parsing if value equals null. That's an out of range. It's a different error. Again, we're going to want an else. do like the IntelliSense on this thing. So it's null. Okay, how do we communicate this? We had this output string here. Okay, so error string equals string dot format. Very handy. Do want to know this. All right. Now we've got the name of the parameter. Just to remind you, let's go up here. Remember the constructor, minimum, maximum, name of the parameter, the unit. So name string is its name, unit string is its units. So name string plus, we can join strings with a plus, a space, must be between parameter 0, fractional 1 decimal place, and parameter 1, fractional 1 decimal place. And then we want the unit. Okay. On the end, not there, sorry. Underscore min, underscore max, plus unit string on the end. Right, so if it's a weight, it'll say weight must be between its minimum and its maximum kgs, right? Because that'll be set to kilograms. All right, so that's good. So that sets the error string. So whatever is calling this method will have to pass in a string, which will be modified in line. And now we must return false to say that this did not work. Otherwise, right, let's make a comment. So out of range, all good. So we do error string, got to set it, and I'm using the empty string as the indicator. Return true. This one down here failed to pass, slightly different. So I'm going to set the value to null. So that hasn't happened automatically because we haven't got as far as the setter. So we've got to remember to do that here. First time I did this, I forgot that actually, and it was the unit test that picked it up, as you'll see. All right, error string equals, shall we have, please, enter a numerical value, because it's probably not a numerical value, and we return false as well. Okay, so that is my parameter dealt with, and I'm almost tempted to make the value actually private in hindsight, because we're never going to need to call that directly, but then again, it doesn't hurt, it'll still do validation. So we'll leave it public for now. All right, so that's that one. And the next thing I want to do is add some unit testing to check this out. Now, I'm going to show you how to do that in the next video. I've actually already got it set up here. It's another project inside your solution. So I'm going to stop there, and then in the next video, I'll show you how to add the unit tests.